Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Arizona passed a tough new immigration law compelling police to check the immigration status of anyone they think is in the country illegally. Should Idaho do the same? We'll debate immigration reform and take your calls. Stay tuned. Dialogue is next. Hello, I'm Joan Cartan-Hansen. Thank you for joining us here on Idaho Public Television, on the World Wide Web, and on public radio stations. Come July, Arizona will have the nation's toughest law on illegal immigration. In April, Governor Jan Brewer signed a bill that required police to check the immigration status of anyone they suspected was in the country illegally, and compelled police to arrest anyone who couldn't prove their status. The law was later modified, saying race or ethnic status cannot be the basis for questioning, and the officer can only ask about immigration status if the individual involved was stopped for another violation. That law, even with modifications, sparked protests all over the country. This week, the Los Angeles City Council voted to ban city travel and future contracts with companies in Arizona. They join a growing list of other government entities, corporations, and citizens who are boycotting the state. Yet for all the opposition, a majority of Americans support Arizona's crackdown. A report from the Pew Center for the People and the Press found that 59% of adults surveyed approve of Arizona's law. A CBS New York Times poll found similar results. In that poll, 51% of those asked felt that the law was about right in its approach to combating illegal immigration. 36% thought the law went too far, and 9% thought it didn't go far enough. Dealing with the problems of illegal immigration isn't unique to Arizona. This last session, Idaho legislators toyed with similar proposals. Now, Idaho supporters of the Arizona law say it's something our state should consider adopting. So what do you think? Join me to debate Arizona's immigration law and immigration reform, and we'll take your calls. Our two gentlemen. State Senator Mike Jorgensen of Hayden sponsored several immigration reform bills last session, and he says he supports the Arizona law. Sir, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Also joining us is Leo Morales, Immigration Policy Director for the Idaho Community Action Network. Mr. Morales opposes the Arizona law. Sir, thank you for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And of course, we want to hear from you. Give us a call, toll free at 1-800-973-9800. Well, let's dive into that first question. Why do you support the Arizona proposal?
Well, the first thing is that Arizona's actions, I think, has brought the focus nationwide, and I believe it will cause Congress to have to deal with the problem. And it's very sad that we've had this problem for an extended period of time, and Congress has just looked the other way, and I think that they've contributed to the problem.
Mr. Morales, why do you oppose it?
Definitely. You know, what I agree with the senator is that definitely this has brought the issue to the forefront where it needs to be. But I do disagree in the type of approach that are being done across the nation. I mean, immigration law and the immigration system is something that's tremendously complex. And to have patchwork in 50 states just doesn't make sense. Again, what the state of Arizona has done with creating its own state policy is it actually has increased bureaucracy, it has increased big government. And again, this is something that the federal government should be dealing with instead of having patchwork in 50 states.
And do you think this is a patchwork approach? If
well,
every state has a slightly different rule, isn't that going to be too confusing?
No, actually that's not the case at all. The federal government's very clear as to what areas states can govern themselves with respect to issues of immigration. And under the 1986 federal immigration law, the federal government says that that states have the right to enforce immigration through employer verification. That's not patchwork. That's widespread. With respect to Senate Bill 1070 or the Arizona law, again, that is not a unique law or authority for the law. This is nothing more than a replication of an existing federal law that's been in place since 1940.
again, I would disagree with the senator. If the law was already there, then why do we need it? The reality is that this law, I would say, is far-reaching. And in fact, it forces police officers, law enforcement, to go beyond the work that they normally do. So this is state agencies. Again, it forces law enforcement to do immigration work at the local level, to the point that, for example, in the specific law, if individuals, if community members, for example, break a municipal code, whether their grass is too tall, they're not mowing their lawns, parking tickets, etc., all of a sudden it gives officers reasons to begin to ask for Arizonans' immigration status. And again, so I would say, I would disagree with the senator that the law is already what we have in the books as a result of the 1986 law. This particular law in Arizona goes beyond what the federal law already allows. And that's one of the reasons I would say that, as the courts take up this issue, there will be that issue that it's unconstitutional. And I agree that the courts and Immigration Act that passed in 1986 gave certain leeway to states. But what we have been seeing is certain laws and policies across states that have actually been declared unconstitutional or have not moved forward as a result. And I think we'll see something similar in the state of Arizona as well.
Well, Mr. Morales, you're not the first person that's disagreed with me, but you're a pleasant person, and I enjoy the discussion. Let me point out to you that with respect to enforcement of the Arizona laws, already Arizona's laws have been tested in the Ninth Circuit Court and withstood those questions. So I would stand on the fact that it's constitutional, it's proper, and what they did was specifically what was prescribed or allowed to them by the 1986 immigration standard. You say, if we have laws, why do we need to pass new ones? Because they haven't been enforced. And lack of enforcement has encouraged certain situations. So actually, the type of legislation that I've proposed is called attrition through enforcement. And that's a common terminology. So,
yeah, definitely.
Could you define attrition through enforcement?
Yes. Actually, Arizona passed a law that was, again, allowed under the 1986 federal immigration that required employers to check IDs through E-Verify. What the facts show is, now that that has been in place for 3 years, that illegal immigrants have left the state of Arizona.
Well, there's still 450,000 illegal immigrants, undocumented workers in the state of Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing that happened, you're asking what is attrition through enforcement. And attrition is caused by putting this deterrent in place. And the deterrent is all employers are required to check the identification of a person they hire.
Right.
It can either be done by an I-9, which is a passive form, or what I would call fire insurance. It does nothing progressive. You simply maintain that information if authorities come around and inquire as to who you've employed. Whereas E-Verify is proactive. It's instantaneous. It's 98% accurate. So the actual facts is that when people have come and their IDs haven't matched, they don't come back and reapply because they don't want to be found by the authorities. Now, if that is a statewide practice, then there is a deterrent, and yes, again, facts and history would show that there has been an exodus of illegal immigrants in Arizona. And that exodus hasn't all gone to other states. In fact, a good deal of those people went back to Mexico. But yes, they are going to other states like Utah, Texas, Colorado, and that's why those states are starting to adopt the same type of legislation.
Was that enough? Did they have to take it to the next step of having police actually be compelled to stop and say, I want to see your papers? In Arizona, was the E-Verify not enough?
Well, in my opinion, that's where I expected to start here in Idaho, was with the E-Verify at the employment level. And I think it's a stretch to say, we want to take and adopt the Arizona Enforcement Senate Bill 1070. However, it does pose an option to Idahoans. If you don't want enforcement through employment, then you can have enforcement through the police. And I realize that this issue of people being profiled can be an issue, but the Arizona law doesn't permit anyone to be arrested or detained or questioned for race or color. It has to be probable cause, and what that means is more than one issue that might lead to suspicion. Okay.
We've got a couple of viewers that I want to get on. Let's get to Tracy in Meridian. Tracy.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, go ahead.
Good. I had a question for Mr. Morales. You mentioned a comment a little bit earlier about the federal law has certain immigration laws that are in effect right now. What actual effect is the federal laws doing right now? And are they enforcing those laws considering what the state of Arizona is doing right now?
Thank you for your call.
Definitely. Obviously there are several federal immigration laws, and including enforcement. And I would say that enforcement is currently being done right now. In fact, again, under the Bush administration, we had over 300,000 illegal immigrants that were deported. Under the Obama administration, the deportations have actually increased. So enforcement is occurring. I think beyond what the laws are there is the reality that we have a broken immigration system. We have a very outdated system that's hurting all Americans regardless of immigration status. And I think that's where the problem is. And again, the courts have already indicated, and the Constitution gives the purview of changing immigration law. That's a federal issue, and that's something that they need to do. And so again, with regards to enforcement, that's already been done. The problem is that we have a broken system, and only Congress can tackle this issue in a way that's comprehensive.
Well, I would add that in the absence of Congress acting as an elected state official, we have the duty and the right to take every precaution to protect our states. And if the United States Congress isn't acting and isn't enforcing, then I, as an elected Idaho official, will do everything that I can to protect lawfully the citizens of Idaho.
Senator, are you in support in creating 50 state different immigration laws across the country?
No, I'm not proposing that at all.
Okay.
I'm here as an Idaho elected official. I'm worried about Idaho. I'm not a congressman. That's a question you could address to a congressman.
Speaking of congressman, earlier this week on the Idaho debates, we had the two gentlemen who are running in the 1st Congressional District Republican primary spoke to this issue, and we have a clip of what they had to say. Let's take a listen.
I support letting states make those decisions if they have to, because there's a lack of vision from Congress and this current administration. And I, unlike my opponent, disagree. He disagrees with me that states should not enforce their laws. I think they should be allowed to, if that's what it comes down to.
I just want to be really clear about my immigration policy because it keeps being distorted by my opponent. Simple 3 things that we need to do. We need to enforce the current laws that are in the books. Number 2, we need to make sure that we put the military at the border so we can secure our borders. And number 3, we need to have an immigration system that actually works so people that want to work in the United States and employers who need workers can get together and work according to the law.
So that's that's basically the premise. There's two kind of sort of conflicting decisions there. Is there something that you heard that you would agree with of the two gentlemen who are running?
Again, my stance is this, is that the federal government has a responsibility to deal with the issue. I think Representative Labrador was saying, let's send the military. Again, that's not a step in the right direction. In fact, there was one point where the military was at the border, and what happened there was that there was in 1987 there's actually 2 soldiers that actually killed a Mexican sheep herder on the Mexican side, and that's the danger that we run across when we put military folks that are trained to kill at the border. So again, Congress has the responsibility to bring about border security, bring about immigration reform, and only they should be dealing with it.
But you can certainly understand their frustration, the frustration of the people in Arizona. That
Clearly.
This is not being, it's not being done.
Clearly.
So we're going to take this into our own hands.
Definitely. And I would say, you know, that's exactly the point that we should take from what happened in Arizona, is the fact that the Arizonans are expressing their frustration that Congress has not resolved this issue. And I hope that as a result of what's happened in Arizona, forces Congress to eventually deal with this issue. You know, we've been at this for, about 12 years already, and this issue hasn't been resolved. And the fact is that the longer we wait, the worse it is for all community members.
Let's go ahead and go to Dino in Idaho Falls. Dino?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, this is for Mike Jorgensen. As a sociologist, I know that racial profiling by color will be the predominant method to cull out people for questioning and stopping. So my question is, when people of color become the dominant group in the western U.S., will Mike also support a racial color chart that is going to stop white people for suspicion of strange behavior?
Well, I think the caller is mischaracterizing what I'm saying. First of all, I'm not supporting racial profiling, and this law does not permit racial profiling. And that's one of the emotional things that we need to talk about in a intellectual basis.
And I guess I have one question that I think is, how do you determine someone is illegally? What are the characteristics of that?
If I may, they're not physical. As a matter of fact, under the Arizona law, it is strictly prohibited that anyone would be questioned because of race or color. It's under probable cause, and probable cause requires a combination of elements, not just one issue. Okay?
Though it does seem difficult to not look at, as I'm a police officer, I mean, I've not been trained, so I've not gone through the training that they will have to go through to do this, but it does, on the surface, seem like racial profiling is going to be the easiest solution, because they're less likely to stop me, someone of Irish descent, English and Irish descent, than someone who's who's not.
Let's get clear on this. Mm-hmm. They cannot stop anyone just because they want to. There has to be probable cause.
And the law was modified that there have to be another violation.
Yes.
They can't just, they changed the initial law saying that there has to have been another violation before you can make that stop.
A violation or
that violation is
a
pretty
reasonable,
broad.
That's what they call it, a reasonable suspicion. So it's a combination.
I agree it's a combination, and there's going to be factors, but the reality is, and even if we look at our history here in the U.S., the race has always been an issue. And in uncertain times, bad policy is carried out and enforced. Just a quick review about our own history here in the U.S. during World War II. Japanese Americans, U.S. citizens, because of their characteristics, were singled out and put in detention camps. In the 1930s, Latinos, Hispanics in the U.S. citizens were deported because of their characteristics. So I would say, we already have history that shows that in uncertain times, when we create policies that are far-reaching, that it does have impacts, and the law that has passed in the state of Arizona could possibly have the same impacts as well.
Well, let me go to a caller. I'm sorry. Let me get in the caller here. Leon from Pocatello.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
I'm in favor of Arizona's immigration law. I've seen firsthand this last winter, while I was working a job, I was working construction, and some tapers come in, people that run sheetrock. 3 of them did not understand English. The other gentleman would let us know, what they were saying. They're taking some of our very skilled jobs that people have to go to school for in this country, and they're high-dollar jobs. They come in, they work for half the money. And so I'm wondering, when is enough enough? There's millions here. Let's stop it. Let's put a hole in the dam. I'm done.
All right. Thank you for your call.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. Mr. Morales said that these are tenuous times, and they certainly are, with all the terrorist problems that we have going on, all the crime problems. And Arizona was pushed to this. And it was pushed to this for a number of reasons. Do you know that Phoenix, Arizona is the #1 kidnap capital in the United States? Do you know that, well, I think...
And you're attributing that to who?
I'm not attributing it to anyone. I'm going through some issues here.
Sure.
All right. I would attribute it to the drug problems along the border. And anyone who denies that there aren't problems in Mexico over drugs is kidding themselves. There have been more people killed and murdered because of the drugs in Mexico than there has in Iraq or Iran as far as military citizens. This is a problem. And it's a problem that if the federal government won't step up, then the state has its rights under the 10th Amendment to do whatever they are legally permitted to do. And I believe that that's why Arizona is doing it, and I believe that that's why other states are looking at it.
Do you think you will propose such legislation next session?
I don't think, if I am fortunate enough to be reelected, yes, absolutely I will. This issue to me is a fiscal issue. It's costing in the neighborhood of $200 million a year in Idaho. And that's a best estimate. $200 million would go a long way in shoring up the budget shortfalls. That's what I'm interested in.
Is that $200 million costing Idaho?
Idaho, just Idaho. Just Idaho.
I mean, I probably would need to look at your source and where you got that right, because it seems kind of fishy. I had seen a source out there that's an estimate of what would happen if we were to legalize immigrant community members. So that's an estimate, I would say. But I would say, look, the reality is, and if you want to talk numbers and speculation and what those may be, if we were to have a legalization this year, that within the next 10 years, just doing that, it would add $1.5 trillion to the U.S. economy. Idaho would also be a beneficiary as that, right? And so, again, there's numbers that you can throw out, numbers that I can throw out. The reality is that, you know, and what we both agree is that this needs to be resolved. If I can ask also, just because you talked about the drug issue, and this is where I would say that we need to be careful about confusing the problem, right? Is that oftentimes the other side tries to make this association that most illegal immigrants are bringing drugs into the country. Those are two different issues. And like the senator and many other Americans, I am very concerned about that issue of drugs as well. But we need to separate those two issues. And I would say that, you know, state legislatures, Congress needs to deal with the drug issue and the demand that we have here. You know, to me, that's the scary thought, is that we continue to have a high demand of drugs here. The drug cartels, like any other business, folks will go wherever there's a market, right? Wouldn't you agree with me on that?
No, Mr.
You say that if there's a market, folks won't go there.
Mr. Morales, you're making some assumptions and some generalizations. You're throwing out some numbers, and you know, to take and say that the drug issue is not part of this isn't being realistic. It is, and I'm going to make a final statement. The fact that there's demand for drugs in the United States does not justify the activity of drug dealers.
Exactly. They're two different issues, and they need to be dealt separately. That's all I'm saying.
Well, let me get another caller in here. Linda, I think, is next. Linda in Kimberly.
Hi.
Hi. Go ahead.
I have a question for Senator Jorgensen. How do we define immigrant? Would it be Iranian, Asian American? Where do we draw the line? This is totally racist, and you know it.
Well, again, I disagree with the caller. We're not talking about immigrants because, quite frankly, every one of us in the United States, with the exception of the Native Americans, are immigrants. What we're talking about here are illegal immigrants, and it makes no difference if they're Latino, if they're Iraqi, if they're Asian. Illegal means illegal, and it is not limited to a race or a color.
Let's go to George in Caldwell. George? Go ahead, George.
I am a Idaho native who has lived 6 months. I live 6 months a year in Mesa, Arizona, and 6 months of the year in Idaho. I was in Mesa this winter when the drug cartel people shot a very innocent rancher because they had a spotter on his property who turned in their drug running routes. So, I strongly support what's going on in Arizona, and I wish every state in the country would do exactly what Arizona has done, because we need to protect our borders.
I'm afraid, George, we're running out of time. I want to give both of our guests a chance to say something. Thank you very much for your call.
Thank you.
We do have just a couple minutes before we run out of
Okay.
time on this. If you're on the phones with me, stay with me. We'll catch you when we flip over to our web-only program, so stay with us on the other side. So before we leave, is there common ground between on immigration reform, something that Idaho as a state can and should do, that the two of you could agree on? Is there an action that could be taken?
Well, I would hope so. I spoke to Mr. Morales before, and we're certainly concerned about the humanitarian issues. We're all looking for solutions, and generally there's compromise. So far there hasn't been talk of compromise. What can we do versus what we can't do. I've been down to the Mexican consulate to talk to the secretary, and there was no interest in talking about anything. It's just these are the way things are, and we're going to have to work through them. So
Yeah.
I've got to find my way to work through them,
Sure.
and you're going to find your
Sure,
way to work
definitely.
through them.
And I would say, the Mexican consulate has their own issues, et cetera, but, I would hope that the common ground we find is that we both work together to pressure Congress. We must be able to unite, regardless of how we feel about the specifics of the legislation. We have to work together to ensure that Congress does its job. And at this point, if, for example, the other side is focusing on doing 50 pieces of legislation in every state, and we're focusing in the federal government, it's like we're not working together. So I would invite you to work with me to pressure our dear senators to move, our congressmen to move forward with comprehensive reform.
Well, Mr. Morales, would you agree that if more states passed this type of legislation, that it would force Congress to deal with it?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I would say that that states may attempt to do that, but that doesn't necessarily lead to a solution in Congress. What we do, because the danger that we run is, again, having 50 different laws, patchwork. As I stated earlier, federal immigration law in the system is already so complex. We're only going to add more bureaucracy to it, increase government, which, again, I don't believe in.
Mr. Morales, I believe that's anecdotal.
and I'm afraid I have to stop you. We can continue this discussion when we flip over to our web-only conversation, but for now we've run out of time. Senator, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Mr. Morales, I appreciate you being here as well. If you'd like to learn more about immigration reform and the Arizona law, you can go to the Dialogue website. There you'll find more information, links, and facts in our web-only conversation. Go to idahoptv.org, click on Dialogue. You'll also find us on Facebook. Search for Dialogue on Idaho Public Television and become a fan, or look for our show on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and join us here next time for Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. To order a copy of this program from Idaho Public Television, call our toll-free number or visit us on the World Wide Web.